Welcome to Through the Table Podcast with Tom, Rick, Russ, JL, and Brian.
Talk about our top five at this point.
That
Yeah.
sounds good.
We've kind of run through everything else.
Look at that. We're on a top five after
Top five, as in 5 fingers on a hand.
that.
There you
Segue.
go. All right, well, JL gave me his before he ran off, so I'll run down his real fast. His
Getting ready for the managers.
number 5, it was Francine. Number 4 is Mr. Fuji. Number 3 was Jim Cornette. Number 2 was Paul Heyman, and number 1 was Bobby the Brain, which I'm sure that we can probably just do a real fast one with number 1.
Does
Does
kinda
anyone
like-
not have Heenan at 1?
I
I
was
like
gonna say
Russ.
who doesn't
Yeah.
have Bobby Heenan at one?
Except
How
for
could you
Russ.
not have Bobby Heenan? Not only was he
I
the
don't
best
know.
manager, he was the best announcer, he was the best talker. I mean, this guy, yeah, how could you not have him as number 1?
Anytime he was on, it was worth watching, no matter what he was doing.
And when they paired him with Flair, it was like when like the
Yep.
best musicians of certain bands get together to form a super group.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It was awesome.
I mean, just look at all the guys he managed over the years, like everyone.
Oh, the Heenan family. Just that
Yep.
he was like amazing, and just throwing guy after guy after Hogan. You know what I mean? Just Heenan was awesome.
And then
And the
you'd have to get involved and wrestle Hogan or Ultimate Warrior, and they had the loser has to wear the weasel costume.
Yeah.
Even when his guys were hurt, he was always filling in and helping them out.
Yeah, I always heard like he would actually like tag with Bockwinkel and stuff like that on and could outwork Bockwinkel, which is a feat of itself. But yeah, he was just everything about him, and just even after being a manager, just being an announcer, one of the best announcers.
Yep.
Oh,
Play
for
by
sure.
color commentator.
Yep.
Guy was amazing, full of one-liners.
Just that, the wit and the one-liners was just, and I'm sure most of them were just off the cuff, just boom, and just
Yep.
came up. They weren't thought about. He just came up with them.
My
Chico Santana,
oh yeah,
Jesse had that one, but it's like that one's not funny. Heenan would make it funny,
Yeah.
one of my favorite Bobby Heenan moments was the Bash at the Beach '96 when Hogan's coming down, and Tony Schiavone's losing his mind. It's like, oh, Hogan's here to save us from the he said something. He's like, Hogan's here, and Heenan just goes, but whose side is he on? And Tony Schiavone just goes, what? Like screams it, like he just
Yeah,
like Heenan just totally blew the finish of the whole. But it was just
right.
but it was. I just remember that and when Pillman in WCW when he grabbed him and he's just dropping F-bombs on live TV.
Yep.
That was the start of the loose cannon gimmick. That's when, because Heenan didn't know that was coming, and that's when people were like,
Right.
"What's happening here? Is this real?" Heenan there was nothing better than him and Gorilla doing commentary
Nothing.
together.
Right.
Those two were so good. He was good with Vince, but there was just something about Heenan and Gorilla together.
Yep.
The lines back and forth, and the best thing about it too, everybody liked to rib Gorilla's kid because he was one of the referees.
Right.
Jesse did it quite often,
Oh yeah.
but the way Heenan would do it was hilarious. Again, Jesse did the Tito Santana thing. Heenan would make it funny.
Yeah. Right.
Same thing with the Joey Morella stuff.
Mm-hmm. It's almost
Yeah.
like he's your son. I mean, watching him in primetime wrestling every week too, or they were always together. There was always shenanigans where
Yep.
they'd be out and about. with Mr. Fuji, and it didn't matter who he was with. Heenan could always get the jokes out there. But with Gorilla, it was just crazy. They were always
Travis-
together with each other so much. They just knew each other.
My favorite with Gorilla was anytime like Heenan would just say something so ridiculous, and Gorilla would hit him with the "Would you stop?" And it was every time it was amazing.
He was like that father telling his kids.
Yep.
Their dynamic was perfect.
Oh yeah.
Just one of the biggest travesties in life was when Heenan had the mouth and throat cancer, because you're
Right.
basically taking Usain Bolt's legs away from him.
Mhm. Yep.
The thing he's the best at is all of a sudden you just completely take away. But man, I could go back and watch some of those old wrestling superstars and challenges and whatever he's doing commentary on. I
Yep.
love every second of it. I don't care if I'm watching, name the main eventer taking on Bob Evans. I don't care.
Oh yeah. It didn't matter what the match was.
Yep.
It didn't matter. It was entertaining somehow. He'd make it that way.
Exactly. And so good. Just so good. And his managing too. Like, that's obviously what we're talking about. I used to love when he would be involved. Remember the WrestleMania that Flair won not the WrestleMania, the Royal Rumble that Flair won the title.
Yeah.
And every time someone got near Flair, Heenan's on commentary and he's going back and forth. He should be at the ring. No, I got to be here. I should be at the ring. But he kept saying, "That's not fair to Flair. That's not fair to Flair."
Yep.
He said it so many times.
Uh-huh.
His commentary made that. I think that match was good and it was great. It was a good moment for Flair, but that Heenan's commentary took that to like as one of like the greatest Royal Rumbles that there's been. Like he just
Right.
was, he would bury a guy, but he would also like put him over. You know what I mean? Like he
At
just
the same time.
right. Like he would crap on him like or whatever, and but he would always, still see that guy as a threat.
Yeah.
And it was just like he was perfect. Yeah. There's no way nobody else is number one.
No. And at the end of that Royal Rumble, by the way, during the "with a tear in my eye" speech from Flair, Heenan being there, being part of that, made that moment that much better. If he's not there, yeah, it's still good. It's still a great promo. You still think about, there's Flair like all sweaty after the match saying, "with a tear in my eye." But Heenan being there, especially with Perfect, that trio, that dynamic, you couldn't touch it. You just couldn't touch it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I don't think anyone should have anyone else at number one.
Nope.
No, sorry, Russ. I can't agree with him. Yes, he's number one. He can't be above number one.
But I understand where Russ was going, because I think
Oh, yeah, no, I get it.
he's the number one. We should name 5 other guys behind him.
Sure. You can call it the Bobby Heenan Award at that point,
Right.
Exactly.
So we want to start from 5, or should we go from 2?
Yeah, we can go from 5.
All right,
Yeah.
we'll go 5. So my 5th is it's along the same lines as Bobby Heenan, and it's a little more current. I mean, unfortunately, he's no longer with us. But my number 5 was Sweet and Sour Larry Sweeney.
Okay.
He just same thing. I feel like he was, Pat. Like I think he was in an era too late.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing. He was good on the mic. He was good in the ring. He was, smart.
Yeah.
And same thing. And it just, I think he was great when he was around, and, unfortunately he passed away,
Right.
but yeah, just, his stuff in Chikara and Ring of Honor. And, I just kind of wish he would have been seen on a larger stage.
Right. The few times I saw him live, he was, the crowd would be against him at all times. Just everything he did in the ring, outside of the ring, all, he knew how to play it off right. Some managers obviously can't do that at all, and he definitely knew how to do that.
Yeah, and the fact that he took like a group of just like, I hate to say the word, nobodies in Ring of Honor, and I mean, he had Chris Hero and Claudio, but
Yeah.
pretty much the rest of Sweet and Sour Incorporated was just all job guys,
Yeah. Right.
and it's
right.
just the fact that he made them even, a threat is I think is a testament just
right.
to his.
They had a shot to win a match here and there. They weren't just going to lose every time, right?
Right.
So my number 5, I got to go with Captain Lou.
Captain Lou, nice.
And I go with Captain Lou because in the mid 80s, Captain Lou transcended wrestling and was one of the first, aside from, Hogan or anything, he was one of the first guys that made it to pop culture thanks to, Cyndi Lauper putting him in that video and all that. You knew who Captain Lou was. If you weren't a wrestling fan, you weren't into it, you still knew who Captain Lou was. He was somebody outside of that. I loved Captain Lou. I loved the gimmick. I loved the elastic bands just hanging from his face for no reason. Loved every second of that. You thought that he was one of the Wild Samoans, which was great.
Yep.
He's pivotal to WrestleMania 1. If you don't have Captain Lou, that bright, big personality that he is,
right.
You don't have the whole Cyndi Lauper dynamic. There's a piece of WrestleMania 1 that's missing, and maybe that's the ingredient that you needed to get everything to where it became.
Right.
And just with that personality, it was a winning combination. So that's my number 5.
Yeah, over the top character for sure. I mean, those were the later years of his wrestling, where before that with the Samoans in the 70s and early 80s and stuff was a totally, he was the heel manager at that point, or he basically around that time period he became the good guy after Lauper and WrestleMania 1 there. But yeah, this over the top character, there would have been a lot missing. You wouldn't have had the mainstream MTV stuff without him, for sure.
And he was an underrated talker, by the way. We're talking about Heenan being, one of the greatest talkers ever. Captain Lou, and he would do it at 100 miles an hour.
Oh, yeah.
And wouldn't trip over a word. He would just keep going and just, spit it out there. Man, I can't say enough about Captain Lou.
Yep. My number 5 is the Playboy Gary Hart, going way back to the world class years, where I first started watching TV, and his vendetta against the Von Erichs was like legendary because he could never find the guys to beat him. He'd bring in Kamala, he'd bring in Great Kabuki, he'd bring in Abdul the Butcher. No one could ever take him out. He'd get involved, use his shoes, just endless times. It was always great on interviews, just the way he would look at people. I mean, he didn't have to raise his voice. He could get over. And bring in any guy from around the country, around the world to go after them. It was cool how they did that. Is he just could never get over that. He couldn't pin any of the Von Erichs. No one, could never get that big win, and he would never stop trying. I would always like that about him.
And you actually believed, because I remember those days, you believed that Gary Hart legitimately hated the Von Erichs.
Oh yeah, exactly.
It was like that evil supervillain type of thing. It was that was yeah.
And he looked evil. Like he was just an evil looking guy. Like, but then again, when you surround yourself with like Kamala and Great Kabuki and and Muda, and it just fits him. Gary Hart's a great choice.
Definitely.
All right, so my number 4 is, and I saw Tom earlier with the tennis racket. So my number 4 is Jim Cornette. I mean, he's just one of those guys you just love to hate him. Like, I know we talked about him last week. It was just kind of those, the mama's boy gimmick, and it just, and it was always just, he was just unreal. Like, it just very, over the top, and just everything about him. Like I said, he's just one of those, you love to see when he would get his comeuppance, and
Yep.
just every time, whether it was just him getting beat up or getting stripped naked by was it Gary Capetta? No, who did he have?
The ring announcer?
Gary. Yeah, who did he have the tuxedo? Was it Gary Capetta, the tuxedo match?
Must have been. I don't know who else it would have been with.
I think it was Gary Michael Capetta. But
It had to be. I don't know
Yeah.
why. I can't think of any other name.
and there's just like what we were talking about last week when he, fell from the scaffolding and blew out both of his knees.
Yep.
But it was just you just always love to see him get his due.
Oh yeah.
Well, let's stick with that. Number 4 for me is also the tennis racket wielding Jim Cornette. We joked about Arn Anderson not being able to figure out how old he is because he's looked the same for the last 40 years. Jim Cornette doesn't age either, by the way.
No, he does
And
not.
he almost looks the same today as he did back in the mid 80s when,
Yep.
Yeah,
But-
that blew my mind when I found out he was like, when he was, at the height of his popularity, he was only like in his early to mid 20s or something
Yeah.
like that. That just blew my mind. Like, cause
he's looked 45 forever.
yeah,
Right.
He's like perpetually 45.
He just he was a little skinnier and got a little bit larger as it went, but the face never changed.
And the hair never changed. I don't
No,
think he's
right.
ever gotten a haircut. I think his hair just stays like that. And this is a guy, too, by the way, who's probably one of the most underrated minds in the business. As great of a talker as Bobby Heenan is, I think, and as amazing as Paul Heyman is, Jim Cornette has a mind for the business unlike anyone else, and he can see things and future things. If you've ever listened to his podcast, it's actually, I love listening to Jim Cornette because Jim Cornette sees the business in a way that a few others do.
Yeah.
And, like his opinions or not, after he'll say something and then a couple of months later you think, oh man, he was right about that. You don't see it at the time, but a few months later it's like, oh, damn it, he was right. But I mean, again, he managed all the top acts too for a while too, as well. And even in the WWE, when they brought him in and they had him manage Vader, that wasn't his fault that Vader couldn't get over.
No.
That was how they utilized Vader. They didn't use Leon White the way Leon White should have been used. That was on the WWE. That wasn't on Jim Cornette. But he was that manager that you just love to hate.
Oh yeah.
And then you see what he can actually contribute to the business and his bookings and all that. And yeah, the man's a wrestling genius. Should be. He's been in the business for 50 years.
Right. That's right.
one of my favorite things about him though is it's like his opinions. There are his opinions. Sometimes they're a little like rough, but like you said, it's you see where he's coming with it. You see what he means, and a couple months down the line, you're like, oh, that's he was right. Exactly. But I love the fact that it's like his house is like a wrestling museum. Like he's like a historian.
Right. He is. Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, I listen to his podcast as well, and the fact that he has every single match that he's ever managed. It's like we were here, this date, this time, this city, this was the match. We made this much money. You know what I mean? Like the fact that he can go back to 1982 on a Wednesday and see exactly what he drew, like what the house drew is like, and it just, he has just random stuff like, telegraphs from, you know what I mean? Like NWA, like bookers to like other promoters in the West Coast, stuff like that. It's unreal some of the stuff that he has, and it's just he could have his own museum. And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
You know where you stand with him too. That's the other thing. There's so many people in the wrestling business that, they'll be nice to your face and then they'll stab you in the back, right? Jim Cornette, right away whether you're on his good side or his bad side.
Yep.
And he's not afraid to tell you, and he's not afraid to tell the world how he feels about you, and he's legit about it.
Right.
I don't think there's a lot of people that have ever risen to his stature in the business that are as legitimate and as honest as he is.
True.
Yeah, and I think his honesty gets him a little bit of flack, like especially nowadays with, some people being sensitive and, I mean, like I said, he could easily put it a little nicer or a little more PC, I guess, but that's Jim Cornette, it's
that's why he lost that job at NWA.
Yeah.
right.
But I'll tell you, one of the things he was completely right about was the Becky Lynch thing, because that WWE Women's or Raw Women's Championship picture has been a mess since.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly took money out of a lot of pockets for this past WrestleMania as well. He was 100% right. Now, as you're saying, to your point, he probably could have said it a little differently, maybe, add a little sensitivity to it. But he wasn't wrong in the message. Right. He wasn't wrong at all.
Just the way he says it, he could say it a little bit nicer at times.
Yeah.
But again, that's the honesty of Jim Cornette.
Sure.
He's honest to a fault about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's keep it in the same boat. My number 4 is the same guy. Not much you can add. The whole shebang, talk, the bad outfits, just get the crowd on against them so fast, just saying anything. And of course, great manager, you get involved. Everything, which we've already said.
And he got a tennis racket over.
Yeah.
Easily.
A
loaded tennis racket.
A loaded tennis racket.
Because he never took the cover off, so you never knew what was actually in there.
No.
I was going to say, how absurd. That's almost as absurd as an ether shoe.
That's close. The loaded tennis racket, yep.
Have you ever been hit with a tennis racket? Because I have. Because my brother and I used to beat the crap out of each other in our back room growing up, just wrestling each other. And we did the whole Jim Cornette tennis racket gimmick one night, and he nailed me in the back. I was fine.
Yeah.
Just saying. I sold it like a champ for him, but I was fine.
Like Sting's wiffle ball bat, You got to sell that like you're getting shot with it.
So, are all our lists going to be pretty much the same, with the exception of number 5?
I'm starting to look that way.
I've got one name. I'm not sure if you guys will pick or not. I don't know.
My next one.
We'll see what number 3 is. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll say my number 3 is actually, I believe it's the first woman that was mentioned. And
Nope, we got
JL
a
had Francine at number 5.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about Francine.
And Russ had Elizabeth at 5, but you weren't on for that.
Oh, okay. So I had 3. I have Sherry Martel.
Very good pick. Great pick.
As much as Elizabeth is awesome, I kind of feel like she never really contributed much to any match. Like it was, I feel like she was just kind of there, so Randy Savage knew where she was.
She was a detriment.
At points, yeah. I think it was just
She's more of a detriment.
She was, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
caused the Mega Powers to break up.
Although
always worried about her.
The night that the Mega Powers broke up, when Savage landed on her on that Saturday night's main event, because that's what it was. Savage got thrown out of the ring. And he just smashed her. He no regard for his.
That was
wife
a receipt from potatoes that weren't cooked right, or the house was. That was a receipt from that was legalized domestic violence, is what we saw on that.
Yeah, I'll make it look good. Don't worry, you'll be fine.
Mangled her.
He thought of everything that happened the last 2 weeks and put it right into that bump.
2 weeks.
Joe.
But
we'll have to get him on 1 week.
Oh,
we have to. He's living next to Russ. Russ can go pick him up.
Probably, yeah, that's true.
But with Sherry, I just felt like she was good on the mic. She was a phenomenal worker.
Yeah.
Just same thing. She could get involved, be physical, and it's believable.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it was funny because I was watching just a random WCW pay-per-view, and it was like one of the Slamborees, and it was Harlem Heat versus the Nasty Boys, and Sherry was involved in the finish, and it was just like I just sat there but then like Sherry changed my mind. It was like she was, I wouldn't say she was underrated, but I feel like a lot of people forget that, like, she was Savage, HBK, trying to think who else was
DiBiase.
DiBiase. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Just incredible.
She was unbelievable. She was the anti-Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
And when Savage took her as his manager for a while, that's what she was. She was the complete anti-Elizabeth. Elizabeth's this girl next door, prim and proper. There was and I don't mean this in a derogatory sense, there was like a smuttiness to the sensational Sherry gimmick.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being an adolescent boy and being way more into Sherry than I was Elizabeth, because I felt that I had more of a chance. But what I'm saying with that is that she took that gimmick and she made it work. Shawn Michaels doesn't become the Heartbreak Kid without sensational Sherry.
Right.
He just doesn't. She made that work. And to your point, in WCW, she made Harlem Heat what they were. Mm-hmm. But again, there was just that something about her, the way she worked, the way she used the microphone, the way she carried herself, where it was just like everybody can sit there and say that Elizabeth was, their first love of wrestling. Man, there was something about Sherry that made it twitch.
I'm going to have to say it was probably those assless chaps that she used to wear with HBK.
That's my point exactly.
That might
have
not
seen Elizabeth in those. Savage would fall on her again.
Probably. Well, she was from that period where, she was like one of the guys at the same time. So to her getting involved with them wouldn't have been a big deal in those years.
Yeah. Right.
Where she probably, even back in the AWA when she was there, she was always getting, beat up, thrown around, everything with those guys as well. So she's just, coming in the early to mid 80s. It's just, she was used to that. And I think all the guys were used to that. So it made her more credible that way. Where, Elizabeth is the direct 180 of her, where, she couldn't get involved. It wouldn't look legitimate, like she could do anything,
Elizabeth was always sitting there looking like she was about to cry.
Right.
And Sherry was the girl that would make you cry.
Right. Right, that's true, right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because her slaps look like they hurt pretty good.
Oh, yeah. Well, she was an old school worker, too. So she would stiff on you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure they said lay it nice and solid. She did.
My number 3 is different. So I guess our 2 to 5 or 2 to 4 aren't going to be the same. Jimmy, the Mouth of the South Heart.
Oh, wow, nice.
I went with him with number 3. You still see him at Cooperstown to this day. He'll be there in September during induction weekend. He always is. He sets up a booth.
And he looks exactly the same.
He does. I've watched him set up the booth, go into the alleyway, put his jacket on and all this. It's so sad to see. You feel bad for the guy. It's like, why are you here? It's all about baseball. But he's... Oh, yes, got it with him. Wicked nice guy. Completely nice guy. But that's not why I put him 3. I put him 3 because you think of some of the guys that he worked with over the years, the Hart Foundation.
Yep.
I mean, as much as Sherry made Shawn Michaels, Jimmy Hart turned a guy who could barely speak in Bret Hart and made Bret Hart one of the greatest workers of all time. Granted, he didn't use him during his singles career, but that influence was there. And again, you don't work with arguably one of the top 5 top guys ever in the business and not be involved as one of the greatest managers. And he's got a legit friendship with Hogan. He's one of that inner circle with him.
Yeah.
So,
for sure. Wherever he goes, he goes. Yep.
Exactly. And that right there to me is, that's the business right there, right? It's all about who you know. And again, one of really good talker, really underrated. And as a heel manager, God, you love to hate that man. And I loved heels. I was always into the heels.
Yep.
Man, when he came out, there was something about him that I turned baby every time he came out. He was easy to hate, which means he did his job.
Exactly, he did. Yep. I mean, just from his laugh, that goofy little mustache that he had, running up, jumping up and down, laughing, the megaphone, of course, just the whole persona and just who he would manage, where he'd manage these big guys, and you're like, why is he with them? But he'd get them all over, as you said. It was half
Paul
him.
Roma something.
He would do most of the talking for a lot of these guys that couldn't, cut an interview,
right,
or be around ringside and get them all the heat that they're, that they could get. So he was a big advantage with having him around.
Here's something else about him too. We talked about WrestleMania 1 with Captain Lou. Jimmy Hart was connected musically.
Yep. Oh yeah.
And he was responsible behind the scenes for getting a lot of those people involved.
Yeah.
Not only that, he did a lot of the wrestlers' entrance music back in those days. He's responsible just as much for Real American and for the Demolition theme and
the Young
the
Stallions,
All-American.
I still remember that one.
Yes, the Young Stallions. Love that one. Remember they stole the theme music.
Yep. Right.
The Rougeau brothers theme, things like that. I mean, he people forget that the WWF at one point was kind of like how ECW was, and where they're internally having people create things and provide things so they could grow as a company.
Right.
As Tommy Dreamer is answering the phones as you're trying to order a T-shirt, Jimmy Hart, who is one of the big time managers, is writing theme songs. That, as we all know in this business, if you can do multiple things, you will be around for a long time.
That's for sure. Yeah. I mean, you don't realize how many songs that he did have a hand in. There were so many. It's crazy when you look at it.
How can you forget at the end of Real American his hoo 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 hoo? You can hear it loud and proud at the very end.
Oh yeah, he had that distinctive voice. You knew when it was, that's Jimmy.
And the best part is that when he was in the WWF and Hogan was at the top of his game, he kept trying to find guys to beat Hogan.
Yep.
Meanwhile, they're thick as thieves, and he didn't know that in those days. It wasn't until later where you're like, wait a minute. Did his job.
Yep. All those mid-'80s wrestler managers had the same, all of them could have made anyone's list, really. I mean, they all of them were a little bit different, but they all were, you remember them very well.
And Tom mentioned it a little bit ago, but no matter what it was, he always had the jacket, the airbrushed outfits to go with each. He could be managing 6 different guys on a card, and he would have a suit, a full suit for every single one of them. He was probably spending like $10,000 on ring gear.
Probably, yeah.
Are you kidding? You would just take a white suit up to Hampton Beach and have the airbrush guy take care of it for him.
He probably did it himself.
Yeah, right. While he's writing music, he's airbrushing.
All right, well, I'll go with my number 3. My number 3 is Paul Heyman. Just for the simple fact of you hate Roman Reigns because of him. You know, people now like him. He used to be one of the most hated guys. People love Heyman. And, of course, the spokesman for Brock Lesnar, who cannot cut an interview. If it wasn't for Heyman, he would never have gotten anywhere near as big as him. And, of course, just the voice of ECW, where he
Reigns.
managed different people. Just his voice alone, just in promos and everything, you know.
The
Just-
Dangerous Alliance.
And, right, going back to WCW there with the Dangerous Alliance, one of my favorite groups of all time. I mean, he's been around for a long, long time, and he just knew how to do it.
He feuded with the kid from the Wonder Years.
Missy Hyatt and Jason Harvey, yep. He
Yep.
had feuds with them. Arm wrestling matches, I remember those. Oh, but yeah, it's just him as a manager and just his talking. It's, you know, one of the top in the game.
The one thing I liked about, like, especially the Dangerous Alliance was the fact that, like, it was. I mean, everybody in the group was talented, but for the most part, they were all mid carders.
Right.
You stick them all together. Next thing you know, they're headlining war games. You know what I
Yep.
mean? It's just, and I feel like that was a lot due to Heyman's mouth and
Yeah.
you know his ability to sell the match.
Right.
I'm waiting to talk on him, and you'll see why in a second.
I gotcha.
Is it any chance that it's your number two? Because he's my
Well,
number
maybe.
two as well.
Let's
Yep.
see, it could be your number two or your number two.
He's my number, yeah, Paul Heyman's my number two as well.
Oh,
I will let you start.
Honestly, same things we were just saying. I just feel like, you know, the first time I saw him was WCW, like early WCW,
Yeah.
giant, you know, ridiculous cell phone,
yep.
you know, and it's just looking like Michael Keaton. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Just
The bad mullet.
yeah, and it's just, and he was awesome. He was,
Yeah.
you know, no matter what, he always made me want to watch. Like I couldn't wait to see Sting Squadron beat up the Dangerous Alliance, and that's due to just the fact that you hated Paul Heyman so much, or Paul E. Dangerously so much that
Yeah. Yeah.
you know you wanted to see that happen. And like you said too, the just, you know, voice of ECW, and just, you know, and even everybody that he's managed, you know, except for Ryback, you know, they've all done something.
True.
You know what I mean? Like it just,
Yeah.
and I just feel like his influence on wrestling is just, there's still a lot left.
Yeah. Mhm.
You know.
Yep.
If it wasn't for Bobby Heenan, he would be number one in a heartbeat. As far as wrestling personalities, he may be number one. I don't know how many other minds are in the business that can compete with his.
Mhm.
He took a nothing independent organization, changed it, and made a run at the big two at the time.
Mhm.
To a point where the WWE had to notice them and had to recognize them. Here's this young upstart promotion, and he did all that out of his parents' basement.
Put him on the payroll.
Yeah. He is an unbelievable motivator and talker. You think of some of the guys that he has managed over the years. Brian, you made the point. The WWE has been trying for years to get Roman Reigns over. How did they finally do it? Turn him heel, stick him with Heyman.
Mhm.
Now he's over. Finally over.
Right.
Because you put him with Heyman.
Yep.
The whole Lesnar dynamic, the CM Punk. CM Punk didn't need a Paul Heyman, because CM Punk can talk just as well as Paul Heyman. But now you got the two of them.
Right.
Man, that was a cool dynamic for a while.
Yeah. Right.
He managed the Undertaker before he was the Undertaker.
Mhm. Yep.
All part of that Dangerous Alliance. That was, I used to love watching them on Saturday and Sunday nights at 6:05. That was amazing watching them work. But again, there's not many better talkers. There's nothing in the business that he has done that hasn't worked, except again Ryback. But just like I said with Cornette and Vader, that really wasn't his fault.
Yeah. When you get stuck with someone, it's not always going to work, unfortunately.
Right.
No matter
Yeah,
how
but-
good you are, you always have a few that just can't be fixed.
But
He's
like
one of them.
He took. Sorry, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, to build on that, it's kind of like, like you said with CM Punk, he didn't need a mouthpiece, but when they came together, it's like, oh wow, like
Yeah,
we have something here.
right.
And same thing with Cesaro. You know what I mean? Cesaro, the night he became a Paul Heyman guy, like everyone's like, oh, everyone took Cesaro a little more seriously. Like they thought, I mean, granted, it just kind of, once Brock came into the picture, it was just, they kind of, just swiped everybody else that he was managing away. But, I remember, there was rumblings of, oh man, Cesaro's a Heyman guy now. Like that's like, it's going to take him to the next level. And I mean, unfortunately, Brock Lesnar kind of came in, but, it seemed like he was on that track to go to that next level.
And on a more personal note about Paul Heyman, without him doing what he did with ECW, do we do what we did with the EWA? Do we believe that we can try to make that a legitimate indie promotion?
Probably
Which
not.
we ended up doing. Yeah, I don't think we do, because
Probably
he
not.
made us believe. He built that from the ground up.
Yeah.
He had
Right.
connections from his WCW days. Obviously, we didn't, but he did.
But
So it
luckily,
made
you
it
just
work.
didn't get involved with Bob Evans,
Oh, see, that's that's the issue.
When you got stuck with Bob Evans, he didn't.
Oh,
Oh.
Tom.
Oh.
But like,
It's going to be a rough
honestly,
show to put together.
I feel bad for you.
Oh. Go ahead.
There he is. Tom's gonna fire his FiOS guy.
Apparently, Bob Evans just kicked me off the internet.
Oh.
But what I was kind of gonna say about that, with the EWA ECW comparison, it was, when you were putting those shows together, like the public access shows, they were kind of, I mean, for the most part, you just, it was like the ECW formula.
Pretty much.
You know what I mean? It just, I mean, it worked. It
Segments.
worked amazing.
Well, it had to with what we had. You couldn't
Right.
have made it look like the WWE. You had to make it look like that.
Right.
Which is the best point right there, because that's what Paul Heyman did. He knew he couldn't make it look like the WWE. He couldn't make it look like WCW. He did his own thing. He created his own thing, and it made an impression. How the hell can a TV show on Telemundo at 1 o'clock in the morning on a Friday
It's must-see TV.
become the third-ranked wrestling promotion, and at one point may have actually been the second-ranked wrestling promotion in the country? Paul Heyman, that's how.
Yeah.
With nobodies, by the way. Think about that. We know the names now, but back in those days, you say Tommy Dreamer. Who the hell's Tommy Dreamer?
Right.
Who are these Dudley guys? What's this about?
Yep.
Raven. Wasn't
Paul
he Johnny Polo?
Right. Paul Heyman made me care about guys like Hack Myers and Balls Mahoney. Just
New Jack.
right.
Well, that was just luck. Jim Cornette got sick of him and sent him to him.
That's true.
But he just would use the guys around Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, New York area, just local talent, and he wasn't going to spend a ton of money, and just said, all right, well, this is who we have as our talent crop. Let's just try to build up from there. I mean, not using us as the same example, but, Kirk Roberts wasn't a Green Mountain or working anywhere else. It was a homegrown product, as they would say.
Eventually, we would get the Jerichos and the Malenkos. Hopefully, if it had all worked out.
Oh, sure. I mean, a little bit, a few more guys.
Instead, we got the Sonny Goodspeeds and the
That's
Maverick Wilds. And
Thanks to Mr. Evans, we went the other way, not the right way.
we didn't go where we wanted to.
Nope. I guess I should give you my number 2 then. We'll get off the EWA.
See as he was your number 3.
It's not Heyman. It's James J. Dillon.
Ah. Nice.
I was a big Crockett guy, a big world-class guy when I first was watching everything, and he just made the Horsemen. Not that they needed his help, but just having him involved was just like the icing on the cake. Where he'd take off the shoe and he'd smash somebody with it. He'd get himself involved. There's no reason to get involved. He just did it just to get more heat on everybody. I mean, Flair going to be Junkyard Dog anyways, but just having the fact that he's hitting him with a shoe just makes you hate him that much more. And he could cut a great interview. He never got too overexcited or anything about that. Always dressed the part, and just made the whole group seem like it was a family more than it was just a bunch of guys put together. I just recall seeing him in the first War Games and just bleeding buckets was just like, wow. Not realizing at that point that he used to be a wrestler. I had no clue that he wrestled back in the late 60s and all that. But, I just love his whole thing.
You know what I loved about about J.J. Dillon was, when you look at the Horsemen, you immediately think, without J.J. Dillon in the picture, you immediately think Flair's the leader of the group.
Mm-hmm.
But Flair's ego is going to be a problem.
Yep.
But then with J.J. Dillon in there, it's like, no, wait a minute. J.J. Dillon is the head of this operation. Wow. Oh, but he's got Flair.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Okay. This guy's got to be something because Flair is listening to him. So if Flair's listening to him, oh, all right, he's legit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He means something. He's not just there just to look at. There's
right.
Wow, like he's in charge. How is he in charge?
and that's all he managed, right? Was just the Horsemen. I don't think he was.
That was it. He never anybody else that I can remember.
Right.
He was a behind the scenes guy though, wasn't he?
I think he still is. No.
Yeah.
He was. I don't think he is now, but he was. He was basically the talent guy before JR took over.
It wouldn't
he worked WWE, he worked in WCW as a talent. So he was like, he helped bring in the guys, who they should sign, all that stuff. So yeah, he was a big part behind the scenes.
It wouldn't have made sense to have him with anybody else at the same time because it's like, okay, you've got this elite group, you got the Horsemen, but you have this other guy over here, like say Brian Pillman. You have Brian Pillman. Well, why isn't Brian Pillman good enough to become a member of the Horsemen? You call it the Five Horsemen now.
Sure.
It wouldn't have worked.
Right.
You had to have him with them and them alone.
Yeah, I think they did some storylines where certain people would ask for his advice or him to be a mentor for him, and you go, I have my group. That's it. I won't go with anyone else. You didn't want to, put too many limbs out there and help, be managing 15 people. Why he didn't need that. He knew what he had.
Definitely.
He wanted to keep that money coming,
I was gonna say when you have like the top four heels in one group, you kind of don't really need to go anywhere else.
Right. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It's not like the Dangerous Alliance or the Heenan family where there's mid card and stuff like you just all four of these guys have belts right now. Might as like you said, I'm with the champs. I'm probably making the most money.
Right.
I don't need anyone else.
Almost the whole time they were the Horsemen, and they were all together there. I mean, someone had a title. I don't think there may have been one or two times where all four guys had no belts, but that was rare.
Very rare.
At worst, they had at least one. If Flair lost it, they'd be tag champs or the U.S. champion or somebody. Most of the time they had two or three, which was crazy. They put that's how huge over the stable was.
I was gonna say I don't remember a time where at least one of them doesn't have a belt.
A short run if they didn't. Because Flair would lose it, but then he'd win it back a month later or 2 weeks later.
Right.
It could have been the Mongo McMichael days.
Yeah, well.
Or the Paul Roma days.
That's after JJ left is when the Horsemen kind of went a different direction, which wasn't good. That's when he went to the WWE at the same time. So it kind of almost coincided when the Horsemen kind of started falling is when he left.
Which speaks more highly to his role in the Horsemen. As soon as he leaves, they fall apart.
Yep.
Yeah, because I don't remember him in WCW like the early '90s, when they started bringing like Luger and Sting. Like I don't remember JJ being there. I just remember just being, some incarnation of the Horseman.
They had some weird incarnations of it too.
Yeah, they totally did. Yeah, I think that's, as you said, Roma was in there, and was it Benoit and
I say Pillman was in there for a bit, right?
Pillman was in it.
Yeah, there was.
Pillman was in it with Benoit.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Mm-hmm.
And then after Pillman left, they put Malenko. Was that when Malenko came in?
Yep.
Malenko, right? Yeah.
Pillman was so into the whole Horseman thing that he still had that four logo everywhere he went after that. Even when he was doing the loose cannon stuff, he still had that four. But then again, back in those days, if you become a member of the Four Horsemen, that's elite stuff.
Right.
You're asked to join it.
Right. You're not gonna, you're not gonna be like, oh, remember that awful time I was in the Horsemen? It's like, yeah, it is.
You know what? Think
like,
about it.
You don't think Paul Roma's sitting there every day being like telling his kids or his grandkids like, I was in the Four Horsemen. I don't,
We're talking about him now because of it.
Exactly.
We shouldn't remember that man's name. When Brian said the Young Stallions earlier, I'm like, who the hell? Oh, right, Paul Roma and Jim Powers.
Jim Powers, baby.
I just remember them stealing Jimmy Hart's song, and Jimmy Hart would go on a tirade all for hours about it.
Yep. That was the Girls in Cars, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Girls
and
in
you
Cars.
Just go psycho on it, and you're like, he's worried about a song.
And then they had referee Danny Davis get involved.
Yep, Danny. Mm-hmm.
Old Danny Davis.
Yeah, he used to wrestle as Mr. X on the house shows a lot.
Yep.
That was quite funny. He wanted to be a wrestler, and Vince is like, you're not big enough. You're going to be a ref. So they just put him under the cape, and boom. He still did it.
It's funny. It's funny. Sorry, Tom. So when I was a little kid, I was probably maybe 8 or 9, and my parents went out to this bar in Revere, and I guess it just happened to be after a Boston Garden house show.
Yeah.
And basically, my parents were sitting in the bar, and like all these WWF wrestlers walked in, like Warlord, Haku, Rick Rude, like all this stuff, and so like my stepfather was buying them all drinks and stuff all night and hanging out, and like I had like stacks of autographs from like everybody. Nice. And so when my stepfather was leaving, like people were asking like, oh, well, who are you? You were hanging out with all these wrestlers all night, like, but we've never seen you before. And my stepfather just said, I'll have you ever heard of Mr. X? And everyone's like, yeah. He's like, that's me. And he just did this, and
that's great.
So my stepdad told me he probably signed about 50 autographs after that, just Mr. X.
I'm here with Russ, and he's going to give us his top 5 managers whenever you're ready, Russ.
Top 5 managers. I mean, you got to think out of the gate. There's so many just like obvious ones, and I think one obvious one that I'm not going to put on my list because he's just perfect in every way is Bobby the Brain Heenan. Yep. I imagine everybody else is going to have him on it, and that's awesome because I'm on it too.
Right. Yeah, I hear you.
How can you? I mean, even when he was away from managing, when he was doing commentating, like if we have a best commentators,
yep,
he could easily be number 1 there as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, he was always the top.
It's just insane the amount of things that Bobby the Brain Heenan did. Not only for wrestling, but just for like memories.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Right.
I mean, he's the Weasel, and it's a term of endearment. Everything that he did with Gorilla Monsoon, and I'm talking about what he's done outside of managing. He's he was with Andre. He was with everybody that needed somebody, or even if they didn't think they needed somebody. Bobby the Brain Heenan was there. So
Yep.
I would say he's everybody's number one. We'll find out.
Sure.
He- Probably my number one, but I'm going to take him out. So he's
That's cool.
so
He's an honorable mention right now.
honorable, a very, very honorable mention.
So he's the no-brainer number one, you know?
The no-brainer is the brain.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Right.
One person I thought of is Miss Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people say that Sunny kind of started the Divas women's, revolution of sorts, but
Yep.
Miss Elizabeth did.
Yes.
And he managed one person. I mean, maybe in that WCW, she was with Lex Luger, and then obviously
she was with the Horsemen too, but that's
yeah.
late in the game.
But everything from that point,
Mhm.
whether she was with the Horsemen, whether she was with Luger or the Mega Powers or anything along those lines, she
Right.
was with Macho Man Randy Savage.
Exactly.
There's no Miss Elizabeth without Macho Man Randy Savage, and I would say there's no Macho Man Randy Savage without Miss Elizabeth.
Nowhere near what he was like, how high he got for sure. Mm-hmm.
Totally. And in a couple months, we're going to have SummerSlam in Vegas. And
Right.
one of the biggest things that have happened at SummerSlam is Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth's wedding.
Yep.
I mean, and they're not even facing anybody.
No, right.
They're
Exactly.
facing each other.
Uh-huh.
So the importance of Miss Elizabeth to professional wrestling is just being out there. I mean, George the Animal Steel was in love with her, and that started a feud.
Yep. That was great.
And she wouldn't always like chime in and like help Macho Man,
Mhm.
but she would help him because just being out there, because like she wouldn't offer a chair or a ring bell like all the time, but just that like support
Mhm.
was kind of all the cheerleading aspect of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is just is an amazing take for Miss Elizabeth to definitely be on my list.
Makes sense.
And then obviously this will show a lot of like this list will show that like the WWE WWF is very much in my head database,
Right.
because there's going to be a lot of managers from there.
They've had the most good ones, I should say, probably.
Sure. Yeah, totally. So I was thinking that another person that sort of like Miss Elizabeth, where it was with one person, so to speak,
Mhm.
kind of branched off to a couple other people. But Paul Bearer.
Oh, there. Yep.
Paul Bearer obviously went with Kane and helped make Kane, and
Correct,
also was with Mankind and helped make that feud as well.
Right.
And with Paul Bearer, it was such a departure from Percy Pringle. I believe I knew who Percy Pringle was,
Mhm.
and he was great. And I loved seeing him before and after his Paul Bearer days, because
Right.
he returned to being Percy Pringle as
Oh
well.
wow. Right. Yep.
So
Total 180. It totally
totally
carried. Not even you couldn't even unless you knew, you wouldn't know. Like it was the same
Exactly.
guy. So different. That's what made it work.
And it was so different. And I mean, everybody does just as much as everybody does the "ooh yeah" with the Macho Man.
Mhm.
Everybody does the "oh yes" with
Yeah.
with
Oh, yeah.
Paul Bearer. Like it's an automatic
Mhm.
thing that will come up.
Oh, right.
And Paul Bearer had the power of the urn, and
Yep.
Undertaker is on the Mount Rushmore of professional wrestlers,
Mhm.
and Paul Bearer had a major impact on that, because obviously, Brother Love introduced us to the Undertaker, but
Right.
now
Yeah, I
we
remember
see.
that.
Yeah, so I mean that worked, and we'll always watch that clip.
Sure. Sure.
but it needed to be Paul Bearer.
He
Paul Bearer
would never have been as big as he was. No way.
Totally.
Not with Brother Love. It just was too opposite.
Absolutely. And Paul Bearer also had the funeral parlor talk show that extended angles a little more. I think back Ultimate Warrior, and just like everybody was in there. So, and Paul Bearer obviously helped Undertaker while he was with the Undertaker and while he was without the Undertaker.
Correct.
Because Mankind became a whole different level once Paul Bearer joined him, and even Kane. I mean, Kane will forever be known with the Brothers of Destruction, and Paul Bearer is always there. So I would have him definitely in my in my top 5. And now that's getting a little harder to think, but not harder, but just like there's so many great managers.
Right.
I have to say Jim Cornette. He would be kind of thrown out there a lot in the 90s in the WWE, but like he's known for, being everywhere before the WWE, WWF.
Right.
And he certainly made an impact bringing the NWA into the WWE. And a lot of people hate Cornette because he speaks his mind.
Yeah.
But I mean, a lot of times he tells the truth. Sometimes he goes a little overboard.
He goes overboard. I mean, he's telling you the truth, and his reasoning makes sense, but he just goes way past where you just need to stop.
Totally.
But being a manager and his opinions is, totally different, because I agree with you. He is one of the better managers around.
And he'll put his body on the line. He was in that scaffold match that will forever be remembered, where he broke both his legs, I believe.
For sure, one of them. I know it popped. You could hear it when he hit the ground. You could hear it pop.
Yeah,
in the front row were like, oh my gosh.
Like if we have a top 5 leg breaks, that's it, and hopefully no one else. But
right now, I couldn't think of another one. I'm sure there are.
Yeah, those are just like brutal. But Jim Cornette, I mean, even though some people hate him or say that they hate him or really hate him, they keep bringing him back, and people keep listening to him.
Right.
The Cornette that people know now is different than the Cornette of the 70s, 80s, 90s. But I mean, he was manager of champions. I think every manager should have some sort of gimmick with them, and he had the tennis racket that he could use to his advantage, or just use it as a clapping mechanism.
Right. Could get heat either way.
Totally. And sometimes I forget, and I shouldn't, and I instantly remember, but like he helped manage Yokozuna. And just like Yokozuna had an amazing run. Hey, Tom, what's going on?
He'll be on. Just keep rolling. He can join in.
So, I mean, Jim Cornette, for what he did with Yokozuna, making him the champion, that he just, you needed these extra people. You needed Cornette to for Yokozuna was amazing, and he's always amazing. But Jim Cornette, without a doubt, helped in that aspect of things. I think. Oh, see, thank you, Tom. Tom Cornette.
Yeah, you know what? You're talking Jim Cornette. How could you not have a tennis racket?
Absolutely. So you just speak Cornette into the world, and you either eat a burger like Brian did earlier, or have a
We
tennis
love burgers, that's for sure. Dairy Queen, I heard those stories.
So Cornette is always around us, no matter
Yep.
what.
No matter.
No matter what. And then another one would have to be Ted DiBiase. The $1 Million Corporation.
Not
Just-
one I thought about.
I mean, he tries in his professional wrestling career, he's trying to buy the title.
Mhm.
And in his managing career, he's trying to win the title for one of his guys. Everybody, or they would get the $1 Million Championship. And then just last week or 2 weeks ago, the $1 Million Championship is back. Ted DiBiase is back into our world. He's not necessarily managing right now, but maybe after what LA Knight did to him this past week on NXT, maybe he'll start managing Cameron Grimes to get that title back.
I can see that.
And so that would be cool.
Yeah.
But Ted DiBiase would have anybody from, I believe he managed Kama, the man that turned into the Godfather, and
Papa Shango.
in the NWO.
Yep.
You needed, I mean, and the ringmaster. I mean,
Mhm.
he brought in Steve Austin into the World Wrestling Federation. So,
True.
and we see how that turned out. So, just the taste of, if you get any sort of taste of Ted DiBiase, and if he's on your side, whether it's in the ring or outside of the ring, that's totally a great thing to have.
Mhm.
And with it being 5, I mean, like earlier, like I said, I had to keep Heenan out of it because Heenan is the best. So Heenan is out of my top 5 because he's automatically the best in my eyes. So I wanted to give somebody else a kind of shot at the title, so to speak.
I hope this is Johnny Polo.
You know what?
It's Oliver Humperdinck.
You had to say it. You had to say that. Johnny Polo, man, I've been watching Superstars lately on the network, and Quebecers might be one of my favorite tag teams of all time. Johnny Polo suddenly becomes if I can speak English. Johnny Polo is a champion manager of the Quebecers, and then he goes to commentate for Superstars after Stan Lane leaves.
Mhm.
But I'll leave Johnny Polo for others
Okay.
because he's great, and thank you for reminding me about him. But Quebecers didn't need him.
True.
Didn't need him, but it helped that they had him. And I mean, what do you say? Do you say Sonny? Do you say Jimmy Hart? Do you say Paul Heyman? I mean, Paul Heyman right now is the manager of. He made people like Roman Reigns for not liking Roman Reigns, but I think we're going to hear a lot of those names from the others. So I'm going to just throw a name out there.
I love it.
It's going to be so it's Armando Alejandro Estrada
Wow.
is on my list.
I can tell you, I never even thought that would make a list.
Is on my list.
Wow.
Just out of the gate, just like with Umaga. Umaga was so awesome, and it just sucks that like Umaga is no longer with us. But the WWE got rid of him too. They could have put him with anybody. I mean, but his back and forth with Umaga was great, and they could have put him with anybody, and I think he could have had like a super long manager career. He I believe he managed. The name is escaping me, but Naomi's husband. Not Naomi's husband. Natalia Neidhart.
Tyson Kidd.
Thank you. He managed Tyson Kidd for a week when Tyson Kidd was going through the gimmick of trying to find a manager. So they brought him back. But I think that so much time that was spent with Umaga was so little of time that they could have extended that with somebody else. I mean, the top 5 is so hard for this.
Yeah.
I mean, man, I'm gonna throw him into the ring because I believe no one else might have that name in there. So
nope. I'm not going to guarantee it, but I'm pretty sure that you're the only one with them.
Right. So I wanted to mix it up a little bit. I mean, you instantly go through the database and you're just like, okay, that person, that person, that person, that's person. Right. And then it's just like, but no, you know, so, but yeah. So Miss Elizabeth, Ted DiBiase, Jim Cornette, Paul Bearer, and Armando Alejandro Estrada. Heard it here first. Heard it here first. Take it away.
Wild. No reaction. Wow.
Shell shocked. Shell shocked.
How do you follow that up?
I thought it was Johnny Polo, and it went to Estrada.
You know, Johnny Polo is a great ad. So hopefully someone has him there. But if they don't, we could have a top. I mean, I'm not going to say any more names because I don't want to take names from you guys. So.
No, we're happy to get your list. That's what we want.
Table Podcast with Tom, Rick, Russ, JL, and Brian. Catch us on Twitter and Facebook. Please like and subscribe. Thank you. Till next time.